All right, bear with me here. I need to give you some context on this. It's not easy to explain quickly. So here is the context, and I'm borrowing from Daryl Roberts' story on the CBC website. Daryl wrote, new details are emerging about a March 10th verbal exchange that prompted a code of conduct complaint against St. John's Ward 4 councillor Tom Davis. On June 2nd, St. John's City Council voted to suspend Davis with pay for 30 days after an investigation found that his comments created a poisoned work environment. In an interview published by online news publication All Newfoundland Labrador on June 4th, Davis said the verbal exchange happened when he mentioned an episode of the popular interview podcast Diary of a CEO. In an interview with the CBC News, St. John's councillor at large Lynn Hammond said Davis brought up an episode featuring author and self-described psychotherapist Erica Komisar. In the episode, which runs over 2 hours, Komisar argues that mental disorders in children like ADHD are tied to a mother's physical presence over the first 5 years of a child's life. The episode was titled Child Attachment Excerpt, Worse Stressing Newborns and It's Causing ADHD, Hidden Dangers of Daycare. Komisar goes on to claim that a rise in mental disorder diagnosis in children is directly tied to the increasing numbers of women entering the workforce in the mid-20th century. We're going to step away from the city council dispute and step into the quagmire of Komisar and to debunk this. Delighted to have our friend Dr. Janine Hubbard join us. Janine, of course, is a child psychologist. This is her area of specialty. How out there are Komisar's comments, Janine?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, it was quite the wormhole to go down researching the podcast and some of her publications. And I think it actually acts in a much more general way for us as a reminder about pseudoscience. And so what has happened here is in a lot of the information she's talking about, there is a tiny grain of evidence or research that is there, but then either how she interprets it or how she generalizes it or, how it then gets extended from a nuanced interpretation to a X equals Y. Just a brief example I can give is, yes, we know that long-term repeated exposure to high cortisol levels, that stress in children can cause, a lot of issues for them. That's typically in kids who are in, abusive environments, like long-term repeated traumatic experiences. But she then translates that to, children in daycare experience small spurts of increased cortisol throughout the day as they learn to cope with things like being dropped off or interpersonal conflict or how do I share a toy or take turns with another child. Those are normal cortisol elevations, and in fact, that's how we learn, that's how we develop. And then she goes on to say things like elevated exposure to cortisol or daycare cause ADHD, which we absolutely know is not the case. So it starts with a little grain of, there actually is something in the research, and then it just spins it wildly from there. But it sounds credible if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah, and that's the trouble with a lot of these pseudoscience bits that are out there in just about any form. They don't have to be podcasts. You can scroll through your phone if you are an adult wasting time, and you'll see all manner of medical theory, psychological, physiological, that is out there at any moment during the day. I mean, were you surprised to see that this was getting talked about by a counselor at St. John's City Hall?
Well, it's one of the reasons why I try to stay informed in what are some of the alternative theories that are out there so I know what I'm up against. And I'll be honest, just before going on air here, I was looking at some of the YouTube comments, and my goodness, the number of people who are feeling validated and praising it and, thinking it's the best thing ever. And partly I'm going, because I think it comes from a very privileged political mindset There's a lot of information she presents that basically the best way or only way to properly raise a child and protect it from, long-term harm is they must have a mother and a father, and the mother must spend the first 3 years at home with them. No commenting on whether the temperament or the abilities of that mother or, anything about the family dynamics. And so there's a ton of pressure on mothers. There's no commentary on single parenting or same-sex parenting or extended relative parenting. My other favorite was, first of all, the feminist movement had people think it would be fun to go to work. That one struck me. And then the other one was that, in men and women, the oxytocin is produced in different parts of their brain. And, okay, fair enough. There is a little bit of research in terms of attachment, in terms of how mothers tend to respond to infants versus fathers, but it also doesn't include any of the information that also if it's, say, a single father, they respond in both ways. Same thing, single mothers. Or new attachment research that actually says play-based actions, not just distress comforting, can also enhance attachment. So it's missing huge bits of information.
So, for us lay people, what's the lesson here? Is it to borrow a page from you, like, listen, be aware, but challenge what you hear?
Well, listen, I always challenge what I hear and my own knowledge. I plunked this through ChatGPT to say, is this information accurate and reputable? And I got a lovely paragraph of, some of it's okay, and then there's some that is really misleading, and then there's some that's completely inaccurate. But I think really being careful of where you're getting your information and looking at what do they have to gain? What do they possibly have to look from it? And I get that it's really hard and it's getting increasingly difficult. Listen, I will make an offer to counselors or any other politicians in this province, same as I do for the media. If you ever have a question about the accuracy of a mental health story or a child development story, reach out to me. I'll help get you accurate, reliable information. But I think it's really important to go in and look at what is the credibility, the more, I guess, look at, what is the background? Do they actually have a background in what they are purporting to be an expert on? And take everything with a grain of salt these days. But there are places where you can get accurate information. Biggest message I want to get here is because this messaging would make most parents feel incredibly guilty.
Yeah.
In fact, she encourages that parents should feel guilty. I'm sorry, Tim. I don't know about you. I don't know a single parent who doesn't feel guilt on a daily basis.
It's part of the job.
Not doing right by their kid, that they're screwing them up in some way, shape, or form, even when we know they are doing the best that they possibly can.
Well, just so she should know, I have to go get my son at daycare after this. Now he's almost 11. He seems all right, but we'll keep fighting the fight. All right, Janine, thank you. Appreciate the time as always.
Well, thanks for being able to at least clear up a few misconceptions.
That's what we try and do. All right, we'll talk again soon. That's our friend Dr. Janine Hubbard, child psychologist in Newfoundland and Labrador, and of course the president of the Canadian Psychological Association. And by the way, Lionel Messi scored again.